Hey, I'm your host, Rico Beard. Welcome to the Week 6 Big Ten wrap-up for the past weekend. And it wasn't a good weekend locally here in the state of Michigan, as both Michigan and Michigan State not only lose, but now they limp into the bye week. So they get a week to try to reevaluate and try to figure some things out. But both teams going into the bye week went out to the West Coast. Both teams came away with a loss 0-2. Let's start with the Spartans. Spartans played Friday night against the University of Oregon. It was their yellow out in the jerseys they wore for, in regards to beating cancer. The Oregon Ducks came out there and did what they were supposed to do. They were a top 5 team for a reason. They defeat the Spartans 31-10. But Spartan fans, tell me if you've seen this movie before. Going up against a top 5 team, had an opportunity, and you were in the game early, turnovers, blown opportunities, and before you know it, you're down, and now it becomes a boat race for that team. Same thing happened last week against Ohio State. Same thing happened again against the University of Oregon. Michigan State gets a stop on the first drive, and then, after a gigantic fourth down play, 44 yards to Nick Marsh, the worst thing happened. You got stuck in the red zone. MSU is absolutely horrible when it comes into the red zone. I believe they have I think they have 6 or 7 turnovers in the red zone this season. That's points you leave on the board. This may work when you play the Prairie Views of the world. This does not work when you play Oregon. You have to capitalize. You can't beat teams like Ohio State and Oregon by kicking field goals. You really can't beat teams like Ohio State and Oregon when you are turning the ball over in the red zone. As a matter of fact, that you saw the play, Aiden Childs scrambles and he fumbles right at the goal line for a gut punch, a kick in the balls to most Spartan fans because you kind of took a deep breath and said, yeah, here it comes again. We're about to lose this game because of turnovers. Now, with Childs, you got to learn how to value the ball, plain and simple. I mean, I get it. He's young. He's going to get better. He really, really is. I mean, if you saw College Game Day, Nick Saban came out and they did the little spinning wheel and it stopped on Aiden Childs. And they asked Nick Saban, how does he feel? And he said that Aiden Childs has a high upside. The problem is, he hasn't hit that potential yet. The problem is he's not valuing the ball. He can make plays, but then sometimes he tries to do a little bit too much, and then that's when the fumbling happens. That's when the interceptions happen. Now, on the flip side, hey, great scramble, throws the ball deep on a broken play down to Jerron Glover. Glover, apparently he hit him in the worst spot, the hands. Glover drops the pass. Catching that pass means Michigan State would not have won, but it's a confidence builder. If you're Aiden Childs, you get to see that, you know what, I can trust my teammates to make big plays. And then with that confidence, he may start playing better. But right now, it's like, okay, when he makes that play, when he does that special things the Spartan fans are willing to see, it seems like if you take Nick Marsh out of the equation, the other players are just coming up short, whether it's an overthrown pass to Montori Foster, whether it's hitting Nate Carter in the hands in the end zone at Boston College, Jerron Glover deep on a play where it was busted, hits him right in the hands, should have been a first down, put Michigan State back into the red zone. At that point, you weren't going to beat Oregon, but it's now a confidence booster of knowing, you know what? We may lose this game, but there is no quitting this team. We're going to keep fighting to the end. But when you constantly keep seeing failure after failure after failure, it permeates into the mindset. And that's the biggest concern for me is how long before this team stops saying, hey, we're not going to let this game beat us, and they just go out there and beat somebody. We're not going to let this game stick with us. We're going to get better. Then get better. Then go out and do something. Go out and get the results that people are waiting for, plain and simple. Like I said, Childs, another turnover in the red zone. I think the biggest thing, though, and Spartan fans, you can remember this, it felt like Aiden Childs was about to turn into Devin Gardner in the -48 game. If Oregon wanted to, they could have just kept releasing the dogs and they could have pummeled Aiden Childs. The offensive line, it's a patchwork offensive line. I get it. There's a lot of injuries, but that's no excuse. It's D1 Power 4 college football in the Big Ten. Man, you got to step up. Lepo, you can't just allow a man to beat you over and over and over again without really putting any moves on. Childs, I mean, there was 3 straight plays where he was just sacked 3 times. And you had a feeling Oregon could have done this for the rest of the second half. They kind of pulled off the dogs. They took the starters out the game. That's when MSU got back into it. Schuster, comes in late, gets the field goal. But it's still one of those things where when you're looking at this team and this offensive line, because with no offensive line, there's no pass protection. But the biggest thing with no offensive line, you only get 59 yards of rushing. That's it. If you can't run the ball, you're a one-dimensional team. You allow your opponent to just pin their ears back, tee off, and just sack you like nobody's business and just infiltrate your backfield. That was the biggest problem with this team is they just couldn't block anybody. The offensive line, I don't know what improvements need to be made in the bye week. You have Iowa coming up. Now, if you're a Spartan fan, the good news is you don't have to play another top 5 team in the nation. In 6 days, they played Ohio State and they played Oregon. Is that an excuse? No, because in both games, you had an opportunity to really establish yourself and to punch first and to see how the other team reacts. Ohio State, you didn't. Wasted opportunity. Oregon, you didn't. Wasted opportunity. You allowed them to just jump ahead of you. And once both teams got up by 14 points, it was ball game. You were not going to come back. Now, I guess the beauty of this thing is the defense. The good news is you got 2 red zone interceptions. That was huge because if you think about it, that would have pushed the score to 45-10. You got Dylan Gabriel not once, but twice. And he hasn't thrown 2 interceptions like that in the red zone, I don't think, in a very, very long time. You may have to go back to his days at Oklahoma. The bad news for the defense, though, is you let Jordan James run for 166 yards on you. And this was a kid who wasn't having that great of a season, but, man, he caught fire against the Michigan State defense. There's a lot to dissect. There's a lot for them to figure out over this bye week. You got Iowa coming up, followed by the University of Michigan, which I think is going to be a watershed day for the losing team. Whoever wins, you're going to feel good about yourself, but whoever loses that game, and trust me, we got weeks before we get to that game, but circle that game, October 26th on the calendar, because I think that's going to be a big day. But before you do that, Spartan fans, you got Iowa at home for homecoming. Now, we're going to have a breakdown of that coming up and probably next week since they're on the bye week. But you're going to have to make some adjustments. You're going to have to figure it out. You cannot let Cade McNamara come in here and do what the past quarterbacks have done. You have to be able to stop the run. You have to be able to do a lot of things. And Iowa comes in with a top running back in and of themselves. You got to be able to just play some defense. And for God's sake, you have to cut down on the turnovers. The worst thing that could happen for Michigan State is getting the ball in the red zone. Because once they get the ball in the red zone, that's when all of a sudden it seems like everything falls apart. Big plays, they score a touchdown. When Nick Marsh goes down at the 3-yard line, honestly, I'm like, man, I think I know how this movie's going to end. But you know what? Let's hope that something different happens. Guess what? It didn't. You turned the ball over. Red zone turnovers are a killer. Michigan State is not a good enough team to overcome turning the ball in the red zone. You got to get that 7 points. You have to be able to score early. You have to be able to punch people in the mouth. You're not a team made and built for comebacks. You are a team that's built for jumping ahead and making the other team play catch up. This week is going to be crucial. Iowa up on the board next, and you win that thing, you get back to a winning record, and now you're looking at a bowl game because that's the key. 6 wins. You got to get them somewhere. You got some difficult games coming up against some surprisingly good Big Ten schools, but you got to get a victory. And I think for Spartan fans at the beginning of the season, this 4-game gauntlet of Ohio State, Oregon, Iowa, and Michigan looked like you were going to go 0-4. Right now, if I told you then what I'm about to tell you now, you would have laughed at me, but it's possible over the next 2 games, you can go 2-0 and finish that 4-game stretch at 2-2. But you got to change things in the bye week, and you have to go out there and you got to beat Iowa, or else this is all a moot point. And now you're struggling to get to that 6th win. For your Michigan State, the bowl game is key. The extra practices are key. And I think you could take some pride in knowing that Jonathan Smith is building something at Michigan State in East Lansing. It's difficult, but you got to be able to you got to strap it up. You got to go in there, and you got to beat Iowa, plain and simple. That is your Big Ten breakdown of the Michigan State-Oregon game. Oregon wins 31-10. I'll be back with a breakdown a little bit later on of the University of Michigan. But for now, thanks for watching and listening. Keep subscribing. I'm your host, Rico Beard. You're watching the 5 Star Zone.